how to release trauma that's stored in the body or the mind. Welcome back to another video. I'm Maximilian. I help entrepreneurs reprogram their life, rewire their minds for happiness, success, abundance, fulfillment, confidence, you name it, I do it. And in today's video, as I said, I'm going to be talking about how trauma is stored in our body and mind and how we can release it. Finally, releasing it, because you deserve to release it. That's the biggest thing. And before we get started, hit that subscribe button, turn on that bell icon so that you get notified whenever I post, so that you can get all this information so that you can change your life. So first of all, what is trauma? What is the definition of trauma? Trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. So this could be a physical trauma, like being punched in the face, by being knocked out, by something physical, hit by a car, which can cause PTSD, etc. So the physical aspect of the trauma can cause a mental aspect, and also a mental aspect can cause a physical aspect. So for example, you could have been abused when you were younger, mentally, and your body could be holding on to trauma somewhere in your body. You could be getting physical pains, physical ailments in your body because of this past trauma in your life. So there's not really one trauma that's worse than another. My trauma is not worse than yours, your trauma is not worse than mine. Trauma is relative to each individual. What you have been through is painful. What you have been through is trauma. And I'm here to tell you that it is. I'm here to clarify that it is. So if you're feeling that trauma, then we need to let that go. That's the only possible circumstance that's going to bring you everything that you would desire in life. All that happiness again, that self-love, that confidence, that freedom that you deserve if you allow yourself to let this go. So at the end of the day, we are like pressure cookers. We allow ourselves to get to a certain point and then we just explode. And that could be a physical explosion, that could be a mental explosion, like a breakdown, a physical explosion like anger, fear, going inside, all these different things. There's so many different ways that this explosion of trauma can come out. And our body will always be doing it to protect us, but it may be doing the negative thing. Now, our body just works with what has worked in the past. If your body is familiar with the trauma, is familiar with anxiety, is familiar with fear, it's going to go straight back to that fear or anxiety or worry or stress or tension because it's more familiar. So the body will naturally go there. You can change that, and you can very, very simply change that. And the way that I personally help people release that trauma is with hypnosis, because the reason I use hypnosis, and I'll give some other examples of what could be used in this video, but the reason I personally use hypnosis is you get to the point, you get really quickly to the point. Now the point is, what is the trauma? We need to figure out what the trauma is, because if you don't know what it is, we can't really let it go. But once we know what it is, we can logicalize it, if that's even a word. I don't even know if that's a word, but we can make sense of it in our mind, essentially. Because if we can't make sense of it, our mind is always going to go to emotion, because any battle between the emotional mind and the logical mind, the emotional mind will always win. Always. So that time that someone bullied us for our haircut when we were 7 years old, right now, logically, well, it was a haircut when I was 7, what's the big deal? But emotionally, we respond from that 7-year-old self going, yeah, well, little David, he was actually such a and we start to get into that 7-year-old mentality again, which brings back the trauma. But when we understand it at an emotional level, what we do is we take the wisdom, but we leave the emotion behind. So we take the logic, the wisdom, the learning, the information, the knowledge we need, but we leave the emotion behind. Because the emotion is the thing that's keeping us held on to it. I need to stay with this emotion because it defines me, it makes me realize who I am. And the biggest thing you need to understand is that any unresolved trauma will always come back. Your life could look perfect, your life could look amazing. But if there's unresolved trauma somewhere, it's like every now and again, flatline, trauma, flatline, trauma, and eventually it will just come up here and there. And this could come up more often than not. This could come up every once a month. This could come up once a year. This could come up once a day. This could come up once a week. There's no specific amount of time that it will come up, But the people that have that trauma built up, it's going to feel tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And as I said, this can come out in mental ailments or physical ailments. This could come out in like PTSD, where you see people who have been in the army, and obviously this is just a round statement. People that have been in the army, they hear fireworks and they associate it to gunshots. So they go back in and they hide. They run to the fight, flight, or freeze response. And most army people are going to go to that. They're going to go to fight. They're going to get down. They're going to be ready. They're going to be weary. Or some people will even go to that freeze because it just brings back traumatic memories for them. Now, we need to get to the root cause of this. The root cause. Once you get to the root, essentially what you're doing is, it's like digging out a root of a tree. Once you dig out this root of the tree, that tree can no longer grow. I don't care how many plants or how many branches are on that tree, they can no longer grow. But you can cut down every branch of that tree, and if you don't dig out the root, that tree can still grow upwards and still grow new branches. So once we get to the root cause, we dig it out together with hypnosis, then we can finally release that. Now, the body, and this is the biggest part, is this is what one of my coaches told me, always told me to do: avoid. Always make sure there is no void. There's not just an empty space where that trauma once was. And the way that I explain this is, imagine you're in a car park, loads of cars, all full up. This is your body's car park. This is your mind's car park, your soul, your being's car park. In this space here is that trauma, and it's an old beaten up car. Flat tires, rusty, doesn't even start, doesn't even turn on. It's just beaten up, old, and it doesn't do anything. In order to park the brand new Mercedes 2020 in there, or whatever car you want, choose car at your will. If you want to park that car in there, you first must take out the old car. So this is where, when I work with people, the first few days, maybe the first week, is going to be painful. It is. Because we need to address this trauma. We need to let go of this trauma. And once we let go of that trauma, we take the old car out and we bin it. But if we do not replace this trauma with something more empowering, something more positive, that old car can toddle straight back in and park back up. So we must avoid leaving a void. And we have to replace it with something more powerful and positive. So this is where we go from release and surrender to the old trauma, let go of the old trauma, whether that is in the body, whether that is psychological, and then we replace it with something of who you want to become, of what you can do instead, of how we can feel about that as well. And when we replace it, it gives us something that compels us. And once we finally get that thing that does compel us, then it's like being pushed away from pain and being dragged towards the desired outcome. So we're getting both as well. We're getting that desire, we're getting that drive, we're getting that reason why we want to do this. So when this trauma, wherever it is in your body, wherever it is in your mind, once we finally release it, it will feel like, and it can feel in different ways. So this is relative. This is what I've had in the past. It can feel like that ball and chain has been cut from your ankle. It can feel like a bag of rocks has been lifted off your back. It can feel like you just feel 10 times lighter. It can feel like you just feel free again. It can be like you have just released it all and you just feel drained. There's so many different ways of explaining this, and this is just some of the people that I've worked with personally, how they've explained how it works for them. Other people, it can just be a relief. There's not one way it's going to suit. It's relative to the individual. The trauma's relative, the healing's relative, even with time-wise. Like, some people can heal it very, very quickly. Some people, it just takes a little bit longer. And that doesn't mean you're worse or your trauma's worse. It just means that there's something that's embedded into you and just holding on much tighter. And we just need to find that leverage in order to get it out. So the different ways that you can actually release trauma is, as I said, my first one and my favourite one is going to be hypnotherapy. Reason being, it's helped me, it's saved me, and it's also worked with all the clients I've worked with. I've seen such a dramatic shift in a matter of 1 to 3 sessions, all the way up to 10 sessions. It really depends on the trauma and what the person's going through. But we can really see huge shifts in a very short period of time. You can use other modalities like there's something called Psych K, which I know Bruce Lipton is familiar with. That's something that he does. I don't personally use that, but I know things like that can change your subconscious, because we're going into the subconscious mind and we're doing the reprogramming. And when we're reprogramming at a subconscious level, that changes our base outcome, that changes our core. And then my third personal favorite would be psychedelics. Now, I've only done ayahuasca out of all the psychedelics, but even though at the time I didn't feel like I got a lot from it, I got a lot from it. It was a lot more intense than I expected and very traumatic, but it gave me a hell of a lot because it was so traumatic. And it gave me the ability to be grateful for the little things, for just being able to see, for being able to walk, because I couldn't do that in my experience. So I definitely recommend it, but please, please, please do your research. Don't just take my word for it. And if anyone does just take my word for it, you must do your research first. That's my disclaimer, because there's things that can happen, and not saying they're dangerous, but they're going to be, boom, straight in your face. So if you're willing to go hard with it, and obviously when you've had deep trauma, I personally did have some deep trauma. When I did ayahuasca, it was just pain and deep and dark. So it was a painful experience for me, but it was a good experience for me long term. I would have regretted not doing it, although I didn't get what I wanted from it. I got something that I must have needed from it. So I definitely recommend that. And my question to you is, if you truly, truly, truly have some built up trauma in your body from your past, maybe psychological, maybe in your body, please do send me a message or head over to my website, www.maxhindle.com, so that we can schedule a subconscious mind analysis so that you can understand where your trauma is, so that we can release it. Because when we release that trauma, your life will completely shift. So I'm going to leave that down to you. I highly recommend it. It's something that's worked with many, many people in the past, especially people I've worked with, including myself, and many others. So if you're interested, as I said, please send me a message or head over to my website. But other than that, I hope this video has given you some information, some inspiration to help you change your life, impact your life, and inspire your life. Please feel free to subscribe, hit that bell icon so that you get notified whenever I post. But other than that, have an absolutely amazing day. Keep spreading love, kindness, and so much positivity. Yeah.